The sun beat down like punishment on a dry, crooked frontier town. Flies buzzed lazily over sweat-slicked brows. The wooden platform groaned as a dozen shackled people stood under the eye of a fat, red-faced auctioneer. Their skin dark as the earth, their eyes emptied long ago. The men in the crowd leaned against posts or squatted in the dirt, grinning, spitting tobacco, clutching rifles, drinking from canteens of rot-gut whiskey. Another day, another human sale. Near the end of the line stood a 13-year-old girl, barely standing, thin as a whisper, her ribs showing through a dirt-smeared dress. Her feet were cracked, lips dry, but her eyes were ancient, silent, defiant. The auctioneer slapped the back of her head. "This here's Ao. Can't speak a lick of English. Good bones, though. Good for housework. Or whatever else you need." A drunken voice jeered. "Start the bid at $1. Might be all she's worth." Laughter rang out, but no one stepped forward. Ao didn't flinch. She had long stopped hoping for kindness. Then, from the back of the crowd, a quiet voice said, "I'll take her." Silence followed. The man stepped forward, white, clean-shaven, coat too fine for this place. His boots were polished, his voice low, deliberate. He placed a single gold dollar on the table. "Is that a joke?" the auctioneer scoffed. "No joke." "Then she's yours." Papers signed. Chains unlocked. Ao blinked, confused. But she followed, barefoot, behind his wagon. No one noticed the faint scar on his wrist or the medical satchel on his saddlebag. His name was Dr. Alaric Shaw, but no one in that town remembered him. Not yet. The road stretched long and quiet. The only sounds were the creak of wagon wheels, the whinny of the horse, and the soft shuffle of bare feet trailing behind. Ao didn't speak. She didn't cry either. Crying was for when things still hurt. She had passed that place long ago. She expected the blow to come. Maybe at the next stop. That was the pattern. First came kindness. Then came cruelty. Always. But Shaw didn't touch her. He didn't leer or bark commands. He drove in silence, occasionally handing her water, dried fruit, or a wool blanket when the air grew cold. They passed through small settlements where faces turned to stare. Some men tipped their hats mockingly. "She your servant or your souvenir?" one man called. Another spit near Ao's feet. "Bought her for $1. "Huh? That's one more than she's worth." Shaw never responded. He just kept the wagon moving. Ao studied him from the corner of her eye. His back was straight, his hands calm. His eyes didn't roam like the others. She waited for the outburst, the violence, the change. But days passed. Still nothing. One night, by firelight, he handed her a tin cup of stew and sat on the opposite side of the flames. Didn't press her for anything. Just let her eat. She stared at him over the rim of the cup. Why hasn't he hurt me? The question kept returning like a fever. She couldn't answer it. 3 days later, they turned off the main road and followed a trail into the woods. Pines rose tall, their needles whispering secrets. Sunlight fractured through the branches as they climbed a narrow path. Then, between the trees, a cabin appeared. Sturdy, 2 stories, stone chimney smoking, with vines climbing one wall and wind chimes jangling on the porch. Ao froze. Was this where it would happen? Shaw climbed down, unlocked the front door. "Come on," he said, voice gentle but firm. Inside, it wasn't a prison. It was strange, clean. Books lined the walls, maps pinned to wooden beams, jars of herbs, a microscope on the table. Lanterns flickered warm light. Ao stepped cautiously into the room, expecting a trap. But Shaw pointed to a side door. "That's yours. Fresh clothes inside. There's a basin and towels." She didn't move. Then a voice behind her said, "He won't hurt you." A black woman, maybe in her 40s, walked into the room, carrying a loaf of bread. She was tall, sharp-eyed, with a kindness she didn't have to speak aloud. "I'm Nora," she said. "I cook. I clean. I stay out of the woods after dark. That's the rule." Ao clutched the doorframe. Nora set the bread down, walked over slowly, and handed her a wooden comb. "You're safe now," she said softly. "You just don't know it yet." Ao took the comb, then turned toward the door, her door, and entered without a word. It was 3 nights before she spoke. They were sitting outside after dinner, a soft breeze stirring the lantern on the porch. The sky was purple with twilight, and a single cricket sang from the trees. Ao was drawing patterns in the dust with her toe. Shaw sat nearby, sharpening a knife absent-mindedly, not for intimidation but habit. She didn't look at him when she whispered, "Why'd you buy me?" The knife stopped. The air stilled. Shaw looked up slowly, meeting her gaze for the first time fully. "To free you," he said. Ao frowned. "Free me? Why?" He hesitated, then spoke as if the words hurt. "My wife and daughter died during the war. Fever took 'em, while I was off stitching up other men's wounds." His eyes dropped to the dirt. "I couldn't save them, but maybe I can save you." Ao didn't know what to say. She didn't know if she believed him, but she didn't feel like he was lying. She looked at his hands, steady, scarred, clean. "Are you a doctor?" she asked. He nodded. "Was. Now I just try to do right where I can." Ao looked back at the stars. She didn't understand it all, but somewhere beneath her ribs, something unfamiliar stirred. Hope. It didn't take long for word to spread. The quiet doctor in the hills had brought home a dollar girl. The saloon roared with it. The church whispered it between hymns. The general store clerk all but snarled when Shaw walked in for flour. One afternoon, as they walked through town for supplies, Ao trailing behind with a basket, a man stepped into their path. Broad-shouldered, gray-bearded, Confederate uniform half intact. "You disrespectin' your own kind, doctor?" the man growled. Shaw didn't stop, didn't blink. "I'm respecting life. She's not your responsibility. You know that." "She is now." The man stepped closer. "Some of us bled to keep things the way they were." Shaw looked him in the eye. "And some of us bleed to change them." They walked around him. Ao's heart pounded. She didn't understand why he spoke up for her, why he took the hits without fighting back. Back at the cabin, she helped Nora peel potatoes. Her hands moved on their own. "She's worth more than $1, Shaw said later that night, almost to himself. Ao sat quietly across from him, watching. For the first time, she wondered, was he saving her, or was she saving him? The first morning she rose with the sun. Nora handed her a tin plate and pointed toward the root cellar. "Potatoes need peeling. Water buckets there too." Ao obeyed, not out of fear but routine. She worked quietly, glancing over her shoulder often. But there were no raised hands, no locks, no yelling. In the evenings, Nora sat with her on the porch, showing her how to fold dough or season stew. But the real change came the day Shaw placed a book on the table and slid it toward her. Its cover was worn, its pages soft with age. African mythology and natural remedies. Ao looked at him, unsure. "I thought it might feel familiar," he said. She opened the first page. Strange shapes, English words, stared back. But Shaw didn't push her to read. Instead, he brought a slate and chalk, and every evening, he taught her letters. Nora joined too, teaching her how to write her name and speak in full English sentences. And one night, Ao began journaling, not in English, but in the tongue of her ancestors. She didn't know if anyone would read it, but it felt like claiming a piece of herself back. By week's end, she was drawing plants from memory, sketching birds, copying healing herbs from Shaw's books. She was still quiet, still cautious, but she was growing, and the silence now, it wasn't fear. It was focus. The memories came slowly, like smoke seeping under a door, At first, Ao ignored them. But one night, Nora found her curled under the kitchen table, breathing fast, fists clenched. "No one's hurting you," Nora said, kneeling beside her. "What did you see?" Ao's lips trembled. There was fire. Nora waited. Ao's eyes stared far away. "My brother. He tried to run. They shot him." Nora exhaled slowly. "My mama hid me under the hut. She told me not to move, not even to cry." Ao's voice shook. "But they found me, took me. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She just watched me go." Tears fell then, not loud, but heavy. Nora wrapped her arms around the girl, and Ao didn't resist. Later that night, Ao told Shaw. He didn't speak, didn't offer comforting words. He simply poured a cup of tea and handed it to her with both hands. "You don't have to remember all of it at once," he said, "but you don't have to carry it alone anymore either." Ao stared into the steam of the tea. "I dream about them," she whispered, "but I also dream about books now. About being something." Shaw smiled softly. "Then keep dreaming." It was a stormy afternoon when Ao finally asked, "Why do you live out here?" Nora glanced up from her stitching. "You should ask him." "But I want to hear from you." Nora sighed, leaned back in her chair. Alaric Shaw was a battlefield surgeon. Worked near Antietam. They say he stitched 100 men back together in one day. Hands like machines, heart like stone. Ao blinked. His wife and daughter caught fever while he was away. No doctor could reach them in time. Silence filled the room. He came back to an empty house and buried them both. After that, he walked away from everything: money, title, hospitals. Ao looked at the closed door to his study. "He doesn't talk about them," she said quietly. "No," Nora replied. "He doesn't. But he talks to you, don't he?" Ao nodded slowly. Nora returned to her stitching. "He takes in the broken. Doesn't fix them. Just gives them the time to fix themselves." Ao considered this. "Is that why he bought me?" Nora looked up. "Child, he didn't buy you." Ao furrowed her brow. Nora's eyes softened. "He freed you. There's a difference." Ao whispered, "Do you think he needs saving?" Nora smiled sadly. "He don't need saving. He just needs a reason to keep going." Ao didn't speak after that, but for the first time, she understood him. The day the turning happened wasn't dramatic. There were no fireworks or gunshots, just a sound, a weak, pitiful whine from the edge of the woods. Ao had been gathering firewood when she found it, a half-dead puppy, ribs showing, leg mangled in a trap. She knelt beside it, unsure. Its breathing was shallow, but its eyes looked at her, trusted her. She wrapped it gently in her shawl and ran back to the cabin. Shaw came to the table, examined the pup. "Legs bad," he muttered. "Might not make it." Ao's voice didn't waver. "Help me save him." He blinked, then nodded. Together, they cleaned the wound, splinted the leg, and fed it broth every few hours. Days passed. The pup began to move, then eat, then wag its tail. Ao named him Tammany, which meant second chance in her native tongue. One morning, Shaw stood by the porch as the puppy chased leaves. "She'd have let it die," he said softly. "Who?" Ao asked. "My daughter. She was scared of things that bled. You're not." Ao looked up at him. Shaw didn't smile, but his eyes, for the first time, looked proud. "You're not broken," he said. "You're a healer." Ao didn't respond, but her heart did. It happened after midnight. Ao woke to Tammany growling low at the door. She slipped from her cot, opened the curtain. Outside, a burning cross, planted in their front yard. The fire hissed. Smoke curled up into the moonlight. She didn't scream. Shaw was already outside, bucket in hand. Nora followed with another. Together, they doused the flames, the smell of kerosene clinging to the night. Ao stood frozen in the doorway, clutching the puppy. "They found us," she whispered. Shaw turned, breath ragged. They always find you. Doesn't mean they get to own you. Nora scanned the treeline. They were sending a warning. Shaw nodded. Then we'll send one back. He turned to Ao. You're not leaving. Not running. Not hiding. Not again. Ao looked at the blackened ground. The cross now a pile of wet ash. No, she said quietly. Her voice didn't shake. I'm staying. Shaw stared at her. Really saw her. Not as a child to protect, but as a person who had made her choice. He nodded once. Then we stand together. Ao stepped out onto the porch, still holding Tammany. In that moment, for the first time in her life, she felt like she belonged, not because someone owned her, but because she was free. The cold air smelled wrong. Ao woke to Tammany barking at the front door, low, sharp, urgent. She sat up, heart hammering. Outside, shadows flickered against the windows. Then she saw it. Torches, dozens of them. Figures on horseback, wrapped in white hoods, guns slung over shoulders, the sound of hooves crushing the frosted grass. A voice shouted, "Come out, doctor! Time's up!" Shaw was already moving, rifle in hand. Nora grabbed the pistol from the pantry and shoved Ao toward the trapdoor in the floorboards. Down. Now. No. Go. But Ao didn't move. They're here for me. They're here for all of us. Nora snapped. Shaw gritted his teeth. Just until they pass. Don't make me lose you too. He opened the hatch, helped her down, and sealed it shut. The last thing Ao saw was Shaw's bloodshot eyes, and Nora loading the revolver. Then gunfire cracked. She pressed her hands over her ears, but the walls shook. Someone screamed. Something shattered. Ao could hear the floorboards creak above her. Nora cursing, Shaw groaning. Then, a thud. Silence. Ao couldn't stay. She kicked the trapdoor open. Smoke filled the cabin. A window was shattered. Nora was crouched behind the table, firing out into the darkness. And Shaw, on the floor, bleeding from his side. Ao's breath caught. She didn't run. She picked up the dropped rifle, cocked it like he taught her, and took her place beside Nora at the door. Outside, the night roared with hooves and hate. Ao aimed the rifle over the doorframe. Her hands trembled. She saw a figure running through the torchlight. Gun raised. She squeezed the trigger. The kickback nearly knocked her down, but the man fell. Everything went still. Another rider shouted, "They got one! Pull back!" More gunfire from the woods. Wild, unfocused. But Ao and Nora held their line. Then silence. Just the crackle of dying torches. Just the smell of smoke and pine. A shadow moved in the trees, and then was gone. They were retreating. Ao dropped the rifle, her arms shaking. "Is he alive?" she asked. Nora was already beside Shaw, applying pressure to the wound. Went clean through. Missed the lung. "He's lucky." Shaw groaned. His hand reached out. Ao grabbed it. "You came out," he whispered. "You would have done the same." He managed the smallest smile. "You didn't run." Ao's voice cracked. "You taught me how to stand." Hours later, as the sun broke over the hills, the sheriff arrived on horseback, hat in hand, face grave. He looked at the broken windows, the blood-stained floor, the shell casings on the porch. "I didn't see a thing," he said quietly. "Must have been wolves." Shaw nodded faintly from the bed. The sheriff tipped his hat to Ao and rode away. Shaw survived, but he walked with a limp now, a slow, deliberate pace that reminded him daily of the price they'd paid. Ao rarely left his side those first few weeks. She learned how to change bandages, how to grind herbs into salves, how to stitch torn skin. She became a healer, not in theory but in practice. And once Shaw was strong enough, he sat her down and said, "They'll come again, or one's like them." Ao nodded. "Then we make it harder for them." She started speaking, with Nora, At gatherings, churches, schoolyards, she told her story, not of slavery alone, but of healing, education, and freedom by choice. Some listened, some cursed her name, a few threw rocks through their windows. But she didn't stop, because for every stone, there was a girl who stepped forward, a mother who asked questions, a boy who said, "Teach me." The cabin became more than a safe house. It became a beginning, one for people who had none. And when Ao stood in front of a crowd and said, "I was bought for $1, but I am not for sale," the wind seemed to carry her words farther than the ears in the room. Even Shaw wept that night, and he wasn't the only one. Years passed, seasons turned, the scars healed, but not forgotten. And one spring morning, Ao stood beneath a new roof, a schoolhouse she'd helped build with her own hands. Children laughed on the steps, their skin ranging from midnight to sunburnished. Inside, chalkboards waited, desks lined up in rows. A flag fluttered in the breeze, not one of a nation, but one she painted herself, a rising sun over broken chains. Shaw stood in the back, cane in hand, eyes shining. Nora held the first book they'd ever used to teach Ao. Now it was hers to pass on. Ao stepped onto the platform, heart steady. "I was once a number," she said. "A price, a possession." The room fell silent, but no more. "I'm a name, a teacher, a builder, a survivor." Cheers erupted. Some clapped, others cried. And in that moment, under the glow of new lanterns and fresh chalk dust, Ao chose her future, and it chose her back. 5. The dollar framed, 300 words. In the corner of her schoolhouse hangs a small frame. Inside it, a single gold coin, dulled by time, but still gleaming faintly in the light. Below it, a plaque reads, "He bought me for $1, but gave me a future no one expected." Visitors often ask about it. Ao smiles and tells the story, not of pain, but of transformation, of how a man with a broken heart used his last bit of faith to save a girl everyone else had given up on, and how that girl didn't stay silent, didn't stay small. She became something more. One evening, the sun dipping behind the hills, Ao sat outside the schoolhouse with Shaw beside her. Tammany, old and gray, rested at their feet. Children played in the field. Laughter echoed. She opened a book and began to read aloud, her voice clear, her eyes bright. Shaw didn't say anything. He didn't need to, because he saw it now, what he hadn't seen the day he handed over a single coin. He didn't save her. She saved him. She was sold for $1, bought by a stranger, forgotten by a world that counted her as nothing. But he didn't see her as property. He saw her as promise. And through fire, bullets, and loss, they both found something they'd lost long ago. Not just freedom, but purpose. Because sometimes the smallest price buys the most priceless hope. Fade to black. Soft guitar chords. End.